Hi, my name is Uzma. I'm a positive psychology and spiritual well-being practitioner. I work with clients of various different background and try to focus more on the spiritual well-being and psychological well-being. So real Islam is about love of humanity. Basically, if I have to sum it up in few words, there's so much about Islam to learn and people can spend their lifetime learning about it. But it comes down to two things. Basically, it's like your connection with God and your connection with humanity. So love of humanity, and that's the essence of Islam. That's how I see Islam, as whatever that we do, our interaction with other people in the world, everything that we do, that we have to keep this awareness that we are doing that for a higher purpose or higher goal. So nothing is random and nothing is meaningless, because when we bring meaning into our life and we believe that it's not random, then it brings us to the spiritual dimension, because then there is a higher purpose. It's not limited just to the physical plane or physical existence. So that's how I see that Islam wants us to reach to that higher consciousness. It's not easy to be a Muslim, because it takes a lot of work on your own self, as improving yourself as a human being. It's one thing to follow all the rituals that people do throughout the world religion. In Christianity, in Judaism, in Islam, there are certain rituals that people follow. But the main message that was delivered by Prophet Muhammad and many of the prophets of the past in the world, it's about yourself, as working on yourself, making yourself a better person. And that was the crux of the matter. That was the main message of his teachings. And if we neglect that and we focus only on the rituals and the dogmatic practices, then we are really missing the point. And we are not focusing on the sacred teachings, basically. By sacred teaching, I mean I have to go a little bit more and explain that, in Islam, we believe that God has created human being with the soul. So we are not just physical being existing on a physical plane and we'll die one day, but there is a soul that goes back to God. And because of that divine spark that's in there, that we have, that we try to reach to God, we try to connect with God. And the problem is that we have, beside that, we have other temptations and desires and worldly interests that keep us so much grounded into the world that our soul cannot rise high, and our concern become the world itself, and our whole energy of our thoughts, our efforts is just revolving around the world, and which is fine. We exist in the world, we have to take care of our bodies, we have to take care of physical needs and all the material needs that we have, but at the same time we should not be neglecting our spiritual growth and our higher purpose in life. It does. There's there are a lot of different verses that you will find scattered throughout the Quran. One of the verses that I can remember right now, it's in one of the chapter called Surah Shams, that says that قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا قَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. It's in Arabic. Basically means that those who will take care of their soul, who will purify their soul, will prosper. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. So the word aflaha means prosper, and zakkaha means to purify. So those who purify their soul will prosper, and those who will neglect will see the effect of it. So that concept has been described, and with my right now I'm talking to you guys and explaining this, but usually I draw a diagram and I explain with the diagram that how we can work towards the progress and what are the obstacles in the way of our soul. And believe me, sometimes it's not an easy process. It's not easy to get over those obstacles. If we keep working on it, sometimes it can take months to overcome one challenge that we are facing that's dragging us down. Let's say the challenge could be greed. Greed is a big challenge to overcome. So it takes a long time to overcome your own desires, greed, temptations in order to achieve, that higher spiritual status. I think that what I talked about, the purification of soul, in itself, which in Arabic is called tazakiyah of nafs, which is the whole thing like refining yourself. It's a huge wisdom, and also not only that, it has a lot of hidden gems in it that we need to discover. So that itself can be a study. We do have that within Islam, like tasawwuf, which is Sufism, and we have that study in a form of like many books have been written like on purification of soul, struggling to eradicate your ego. And what I mean by that is not that you have to completely eradicate your ego, you cannot do that, but in a way that you have to kind of transform it to achieve better results with your ego, rather than greed, maybe altruistic, rather than being selfish, being selfless. So and it's hard for human beings to do that, because it's a struggle, but those are the things which are important to focus upon. And I think a lot of time those are neglected within many of the Islamic teachings, and in many countries where how Islam is being taught. So I think that's something that needs greater attention and focus. So nafs basically is an Arabic word for ego, and ego can be both. It can be positive and negative. So our ego has a purpose. It serves a purpose. Nothing is created for or without a reason. But like I said earlier, the purpose is not to eradicate the ego, or the purpose is not to completely destroy it, because it can also destroy our self-esteem. But at the same time, if we can just transform that, then we can achieve success spiritually rather than damaging it. He brought of course, the message of Islam, which we all are aware of, but more than that, like the potential of human being to rise higher and to be able to even transcend beyond your ego. That's the message of Islam. That's the message that Prophet Muhammad and Prophet Abraham and Jesus and many other prophets brought. What's interesting is the fact that we find that kind of concepts in some of the studies in transpersonal psychology, where it talks about transcending your ego. And like I mentioned earlier, transcending your ego does not mean you have to destroy your ego. It just means you have to transform. You have to change that condition, or what you are being conditioned to, basically. So those are the things which are important. Exactly. So those are the ones that are called rituals. So all those rituals that Muslims follow throughout the world uniformly are actually the way to discipline yourself. For example, fasting during Ramadan, it's a spiritual discipline. It's kind of like a way to teach you to have self-control, self-discipline. So that's a way. And then prayers 5 times a day to discipline yourself. So all those pillars of Islam are actually the training principles. They are like they kind of provide us a spiritual training. So anyone from it doesn't matter what level you are from, starting from, you can apply those pillars in your life and apply those principles and be able to achieve spiritual progress through that. That's following basically all the principles that he has taught, the 5 pillars, that's the basic one. But there are so many commands in Islam. And one time a person asked a question. He said that he came to Prophet Muhammad and he said that there are so many commands, there are so many principles. So what should I apply? One that may become a cause of success for my life. And he said that, and it's true that you cannot apply everything at once. It will take a lot of time to apply all those principles that he has taught. So he said the best thing that you can do is do zikr. And zikr means remembrance of God. And zikr, and if I want to translate that into English, that means meditation. So meditation really transforms your mind. It calms your nerves. It has many benefits. We know that when we study about Buddhism, that meditation has a lot of positive effects on your soul. Similarly, in Sufism, zikr has the same kind of effects, but you would see that in Buddhism and Sufism, the difference is about the goal. So if you ever do a comparison between the two kind of meditation that's been done, in Islam, zikr is more about attaining a nearness to God and illumination in your heart, the light in your heart. Whereas in Buddhism, it's more about calming your mind, so stress relief. So those are some of the differences when you study in comparative religion, or when you study Buddhism and Islam and Sufism, and why zikr is emphasized so much. And that was recommended by Prophet Muhammad, that if you hold on to this one thing, then you will achieve success in your life. It's because it kind of like illuminates your mind. It brings that light within your soul. It connects you to God. It has a higher goal. Yeah, a lot of zikr is, there are 3 different kind of zikr that you can engage in, like remembrance. It can be a silent zikr, which could be just in your heart, that you can remember certain phrases, like, in what we say, like mantras. So in Arabic, we have certain statements that you can contemplate on, and you can memorize them, and you can meditate on it. So that's silent zikr. The other one is more, in some circles, a Sufi circle has been done in a group where people sit together and recite more in collectively. So it's like it brings more energy when you do something collectively. It's like uniting that energy, positive energy together. And a lot of times what I have seen in my studies in psychology and about spiritual well-being and healing, that when you do collective zikr, it has a healing effect. It kind of like multiplies in a way. So doing like one person doing it and then 100 people doing it, it will multiply the effect of it, So it sends that positive energy. And that's why you must have heard in many different religious practices, people would say that if someone is sick, make prayer for them or send healing prayer to them. So that's how, like, the healing prayer is basically like positive energy you're sending to others so they can heal and be better. So that's another form of zikr. So there are multiple different forms of zikr that can be done. There are different practices, and those are practices which are very common in many of the different Sufi circles. Every Sufi circle is very specific, though, of what they emphasize. For example, there's a Chishti Sufi order, so they emphasize like not even saying anything negative about another person. That's their teaching, and that's, if you come into that Sufi circle, you have to apply that. Like, you're not saying anything bad to someone. That's their teaching. If you come into Naqshbandi Sufi order, their main focus is silent zikr. So no matter where you are, you could be in the world doing your work, you're engaging in activities, but your heart will always be connected to God internally and silently. And so that's their main focus. So every Sufi circle has a different emphasis. And it's very interesting when you study them in detail and you look at the differences. It's interesting to see that each Sufi circle has something very critical and important to offer, but they make that their focus. I think the most important one is prayer, because prayer kind of give you that, break down your routine in a very busy day where people can be stressed, going to work, and it kind of forces you to take few minutes away from your daily life and meditate for a few minutes and calm your mind. So it's like keep bringing your attention back to, rejuvenating your mind, your energies, because we are not just physical being, we have energy, we have, like the focus that we need, and sometimes we tend to forget that. So prayer, I would say, every ritual is important, every ritual has its own, purpose. Like fasting is amazing. Fasting is I think it's a very important ritual as well, because it teaches you such a strict like discipline and self-control. So you cannot neglect that, and you cannot Somewhat you cannot get that exactly from the prayers, but yeah, prayer do give you the self-discipline too. But prayer directly connects you to God and to bring your attention back. This question is very important, and I have done a lot of study and research and taught courses about it too. And I think what's important is to take in consideration the socio-economic factor, which we tend to neglect most of the time. When we talk about women in Islam, we paint them with a single brush, and we generalize that, oh, Islam is being restrictive towards women, Islam is being oppressive, where if you look at it critically throughout the world, across Muslim countries, Islam is not practiced in the same way in every Muslim country. So every country has their own norms and their own social standards that they wanted to maintain. Now, if some countries are more male dominated, then they would be more oppressive towards women. But some countries who are not male dominated and they are more liberal and open and they have more egalitarian kind of culture, then they would be more accepting of women, they would be working, they would be flourishing. So it's not necessarily that Islam is dictating how women should be treated. It's more about what we should question is the culture of the country and how they are practicing Islam. And what are the socioeconomic factors there? For example, I'll just give you an example because there's been so much in the news in Afghanistan that how women are being treated, and we are concerned about the situation that what will happen to Afghani women, how they would be treated with the new change in the administration. If you look at Afghanistan, they have always been in war. And so their socioeconomic factors are a huge influence on how women is treated, because most of the time families would, like, if they can support even one child to get education, they would say, oh, I'd rather invest this money in the education of my son rather than daughter, because it's a male dominated society. A son would go out and he would earn and he would support the family. The same thing is true in many other cultures as well, wherever there's like socioeconomic factors that are playing a part. In African American society, in Mexican culture, you will see the same thing. So it's not necessarily Islam. We have to analyze it, dissect the problem, and look at it through various perspectives and angle that where the issue is coming from. And so there are Muslims like throughout the world in many different countries, and you would see that they would be practicing Islam in different ways. Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting that you brought that up, because women have a higher position in Islam if you really want to study closely. And women's spirituality is something which has been emphasized in Islam. It's unfortunate that we don't see that as much in today's society, and we are seeing a very different view, because if you look at just the ritual that we have in Hajj, where Hazrat Ibrahim was the one who left his wife in Mecca, which was abandoned at the time, and it was just a land. There wasn't any there wasn't any tribe settled there, and he left his wife Hajar and he left Ismail there. And when he turned around to leave them, Hajar asked him, she said that, is this commanded to you by God? And he said yes. And she said, if that's by God, then I am okay with it. And I'm just putting it into my words, but if you look at it, that was her spirituality, her trust in God and her faith in God that was so strong that she lived there with her son, and she ran between Safa, Marwa, which are the two hills in Makkah, and she ran between those hills 7 times to find water, because she was anxious that her son would not have water. So the angel appeared to her, and then she discovered the well of Zamzam and provided water to her son. So God responded to her prayer by sending an angel, first of all. Second thing, because of her faith in God, and because of her higher spiritual status, that has become Islamic legislature in Islam, that every every Muslim, when they go for Hajj, they go and do the same thing, Safa and Marwa, man and women, in remembrance of Hajar's ritual. So that is spiritual strength that she had, and that trust she had in God become a ritual for every Muslim to follow. What could be the biggest honor for a woman than that? Think about it. And everyone does that. Every man and every woman, even to today, after so many years, we follow her footstep. We run between Safa and Marwa. So that was the status that God has given to women. And to Mary, mother of Jesus. But unfortunately, many of the people in Islamic countries have forgotten that. But God does not discriminate on the basis of gender. This is the beautiful thing in Islam. He does not discriminate on the basis of gender. A woman is considered more spiritual because of the rahmah she has, because of the love she has, and because she can give birth. She can hold a child for 9 months. That itself is a huge honor, responsibility, a very, a great deal of patience that is required. So that rahmah is in her, that love is in her, and that mercy is in her to create, to give love. And that's why woman is honored in Islam. But it's very unfortunate, and it breaks my heart to see how people treat women in societies in many different cultures. And also you would see that if you look at the last sermon of Prophet Muhammad, he warned people when he was giving the last sermon. He said in his statement that be careful how you treat your women. Allah will hold you accountable for that. Because he said they are like a trust. God will ask you about it. So that's the kind of emphasis Islam has given to women. And the other thing is, men and women both can achieve a higher spiritual status. It doesn't mean if a person is a man, then he can have a higher status and women cannot. That's not true, because both will be held accountable for their life, for what they have done, how they have implemented the message, and how they have spiritually evolved. God will not say that, oh, man has a right to evolve, but woman does not have a right to evolve spiritually. It's so unjust, and God is not unjust. And in that society where everybody is think about it, if everybody is being cruel or mean towards women and want to deprive them of their rights, and if there is one man who would stand up for their rights, it's amazing. Yeah, so that brings us actually to the concept of worship, because in Islam or in any other world religion, when you think about worship, it means that you are either kneeling in front of God or you're always praying, right? That comes to your mind. But the good thing about Islam is that worship is a very broad concept. So if you're taking care of your family, if you're taking care of your kids, as a woman, you're raising your children in a right way, that you are teaching them to be a good citizen, and you're teaching them good values, then you are actually engaging in an act of worship. So that can become an act of worship. So even in things that are mundane can become an act of worship if your intention is right, and if you're doing it with the right values and teaching right values. And similarly, it doesn't have to be just kneeling down and praying all the time. That what we have the concept of worship. So what we have done is basically we have reduced the concept of worship to the prayer mat, or just going to the church or going to the mosque. But your whole life can be like a devotion to God, because that's what Muhammad said. He said, Inna salati wa nusuki wa mahyaya wa mamati lillahi rabbil alamin. He said, my prayer, my sacrifices, and my inna salati wa nusuki wa mahyaya wa mamati, my life. So isolation, as I was explaining, is never a concept that accepted in Islam, because you cannot isolate yourself for a long period of time. That was a practice that was done by Prophet Muhammad only for a short period of time when he was in Cave Hira. But after that, he was engaging in all the other activities. He was a husband. He was working, in the community as a spiritual leader. He was involved with people and he was listening to them and teaching them. So he was very much engaged, and he said in one of the verses in Quran, he said, Inna salati wa nusuki wa mahyaya wa mamati lillahi rabbil alameen. And that means that my prayers, Inna salati wa nusuki, my sacrifices, my life and my death is for the sake of Allah. It's like everything is a devotion to Allah. So your entire life, what you do can become a worship. It can become devotion to God. It's not just like limiting yourself and sitting on a prayer mat and say, I'm praying, but then you're treating people in a very bad way, or you're hurting others and you're saying, but I'm praying. Your prayers would not be accepted if you are not refining yourself as a person or be a better person and engaging with others as God has commanded, to be kind to others, basically. So yeah, isolation is not a concept that's acceptable. I also talked about Ramadan, that's the only time where people do that. It's when it's a concept that it's called itikaf. So in last 10 days of Ramadan, people would isolate themselves and remove themselves from all the worldly concern and worries, and they wanted to take that time to grow spiritually, and that can be done if it's like 10-day period of a shorter time, but not for a longer period like months or years. That's not acceptable. Yeah, definitely. You have to do all other things that are recommended to do. They are, I mean, we cannot say that they are real Muslim or not. It depends on their level of, commitment and devotion. The more they are into it, they would obviously want to apply those hadiths, that commands that are given to them. There is no specific instructions as such, except for what we find in the hadiths, where Prophet Muhammad said that women should be covered in a certain way. So the more you get involved into, if you're into your faith, into religious studies, and you wanted to apply those teachings, then you would do that. But there are many women from different countries where they are Muslims, but they don't wear hijab. So what's important in Islam is not necessarily what you're wearing, but your internal how you are, how your views are, that manifest in your personality, that manifest in the way you dress, the way you express yourself and everything. So if a woman is not wearing hijab, but let's say she's modest and she's applying everything else regarding the Islamic teachings, then there's nothing wrong in that. Let God be the judge of that, rather than we judge each other and, try to say, oh, you're being a good Muslim or you're not being a good Muslim. I don't think that's our place to do that, and we shouldn't be, because everybody is on their own journey and everybody is applying the way they can to grow spiritually. A woman who is not wearing hijab can be very spiritual, very maybe progressive spiritually. We don't know. It's like there is status with God. So this is just like, I would say it's more like something which is external. So we should not judge people by their external activities, but it's more like our internal state that matters. Unless if somebody is going against the teaching of Islam clearly, which is not acceptable, then that's a different situation. But if average woman, she's trying to apply the teachings, not wearing hijab, that doesn't mean anything. There are people who have done that in our community, and a lot of people would get very upset about it or say why they're doing that, once because you're known in a certain way. And I have seen that going both ways. Like women who have not been wearing hijab, and when they start wearing hijab, everybody will look at them in a different way, like something has changed in them. Or women who has been wearing hijab and do not want to anymore, they're being ostracized in the community and being taunted and all that. So let it be, like whatever it is, it's their personal decision. I don't think the whole community has to take a stick and run after them. I don't think that's a good thing to do anyway. Let them answer about like what are the choices they are making. Like I said, it's recommended in hadiths, and there are certain guidelines which are provided in Quran. But think about it, everybody is on their journey on a different way. right? They're getting closer to God in different ways, or they're applying religious practices in different ways. So you may be on level 1, but the other person would be on level 2, and then another person would be on level 3. So how can you really say, oh, this applies, level 3 applies to everyone? Which is not correct, because if you're like, you can think about this in another example. If you have kids in elementary school, they have to go through first grade, second grade in order to achieve a little bit more maturity and then be able to go to fifth grade, right? You cannot teach them the material of fifth grade to first grader. You know, that will not, their mind will not be able to absorb that. They will get confused. So everybody has to go through stages, and Islam talks about that there are darajat. You have to move in stages. So you progress gradually. So some people can be on, you know, on a beginner level, some can be an intermediate level, and some could be maybe more advanced level. I think once when I was younger, I had that all, you know, I've seen the discrimination and suppression of women when I was growing up. And I used to feel like I questioned that in a society, and I used to feel that this is very unjust, why women are treated like this, and you know, why men have this authority over them, or how they can control them or dictate. And I was very fortunate that in my search, I was able to find answers to my questions. And one of the answers that I was seeking deeply was that God doesn't discriminate between male and female. And I think that what makes me fall in love with Islam, because it's all about soul. It's all about your spirit. It has nothing to do your gender, your body, your physical appearance, but this is what is important, what's within you. So that made me fall in love with Islam. And sometimes people feel that, if like there are times where people feel really, I'm not talking about feeling, but you know, sometimes where you feel like something is not right, you feel like, you know, you're unhappy, you know, deep down inside, things like that. It's like, you know, you have to take care of your soul. You have to nurture your soul. And we don't think of it in that way, that, oh, if something is not right, we need to look at it like, what's going wrong? What are we doing that's maybe suppressing our soul? Or maybe directly, indirectly, we are oppressing ourselves, you know, oppressing our soul. So you have to like kind of nurture your soul. You have to feed it. And the way to feed your soul is like by either zikr or love of God or love of humanity, doing those kind of work that kind of makes you happy within or inside. You know, gives you genuine happiness, not fleeting happiness. Oh, Islam basically, you know, the translated word is like, if you translate like linguistically, it means peace. Yeah, but there are many verses that talks about love of God. God loves towards humanity, and their love towards Him. And sometimes people have this question that how can you love someone you cannot see, right? We cannot see God. But love is a weird thing. I think it's more like a feeling. And it can always be there. It's just like a genuine, I would say, inclination. You know, it's just your heart just goes out. There's an inclination. There's a feeling. So even if you cannot see, you can still love someone. You can still love God. We fell in love with ideas sometimes. You know, that's something which is not tangible. But we love the idea or the vision of something, and we say, oh, I love this idea, I love this vision, I want to manifest it, you know. Or maybe like I had that vision for my school, that I wanted to teach that. You know, that was the vision I had, and it manifested later on, but I had that, I hold on to it for so long. So that was something. You can fall in love with ideas, you know. So why we cannot fall in love with God? Yeah, so that's according to one of the hadith, that Prophet Muhammad, when he returned from, they returned from one of the battle, and he said to the followers that now we have returned from a smaller jihad to a greater jihad. So basically the word jihad means striving against your nafs, that we talked earlier, like against your soul or negative desires. And to conquer yourself is a very difficult task. So that's what he meant, that you have to return from the greater jihad, from a smaller jihad to greater jihad, because a greater jihad is to conquer yourself. And that's what it means, to conquer your nafs or your ego. Oh, definitely. It is a religion of peace and religion of love. It's like how people apply it. And that's very important, it's very critical, because we have all these instructions and knowledge, but all that knowledge would not do any good if we don't really apply it. And there's one of the Imam, he was one who actually revived Islam, Imam al-Ghazali, and he said that knowledge without application is useless. And that's very true, because in another hadith, Prophet Muhammad said that if you have little knowledge and if you apply it, then Allah will increase your knowledge even more. So it's by only application that we learn more. But if you have all the knowledge and you never apply it, then you will not see the results in your life. You will never see the results.